Okay guys, I think we are ready to start, right? First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Marina Morozova-Yesipenko, and what do I do? Oh, I've been preparing for exams all my life, and like TKT is one of them, and I would like to share some tips probably with you, yes, to make your TKT prep, not preparation, yes, not so daunting, yes, and to get you to understand that this is just something that it's quite natural, which can come natural to a good professional, right? So just for you to find out what you already know and to probably spot some gaps in your knowledge, right? It's 7 o'clock in the morning in Ukraine, so it's a little bit probably like a sleepy morning. Yeah, here in Kyiv it's still dark. Yes, I hope it's a little bit lighter where you are. So could you please write in the chat, yes, how you are? Are you fine? So about TKT, could you please write in the chat if you have passed it or taken it, maybe some modules of that, or you're preparing for that, or you're planning to take it. Again, use the chat. Wonderful, okay. Oh, I'm sure you have passed it with flying colors, yeah. Okay, oh, planning, good, yeah. Perfect, okay. So let's start then, yes, while like everybody is finishing writing, yes. So, and how to get band 4 and the useful advice on TKT. So it's a little bit too much for one presentation, so for one webinar, but I was trying to include a lot of information. Probably some things you will need to take screenshots of. Some of the things you will look at later on in the recordings, and I will try to be concise and efficient. Oh, Anna, planning? Very good. Yeah, good luck to you. So as you know, there are 3 modules. So the first module is usually like some kind of general knowledge. It deals with terminology, different types of skills and systems, yes, and all the things which are like considered to be like, we call it like terminological, like theory, yeah, whatever. If we are talking about like module 2, we are talking about lesson planning and planning sequences of lessons, then assessment. So all this cycle, which helps us to be effective and to decide like if we are keeping our eyes on the ball or not. And finally, we are talking about module 3. It's classroom management. I believe it's the easiest one of all. But after taking this module, actually, some teachers and professionals, they start thinking differently about their teaching. So let's actually start from TKT module 1, which is basically like some basic terminology plus deep insight into your teaching practices. So let's see what we can do as teachers to prepare probably our trainees and students. And ourselves. So as you remember, language is skills and systems. So basically when we are talking about systems, we are talking about Lexis, yes, or vocabulary, grammar, yes. Next we are talking about functions and phonology. When we are talking about skills, we usually refer to receptive skills, listening and reading, and productive skills, which are like aimed at producing something, speaking and writing. So all of these things should be considered. So this is the basic knowledge of TKT success probably. So when you are talking about teaching systems, yeah, so once again for you to revisit, Lexis, grammar, functions and phonetics, yes, and teaching, yes, and first of all we will of course look at the systems and then we will go to skills lessons. So when we're talking about a word, yes, and when we're talking about like knowing Lexis, yes, so we need to know what it means, yes, to be aware of the word, yes, and basically our important thing is when we talk about meaning, yes, form and pronunciation. When we are teaching a word, meaning always comes first, and we need to be aware of that as teachers. After that, we need to present the pronunciation of the form of the word, yes, so like meaning in this case a written form, or vice versa, yeah, but again it depends what you are presenting, yes, so grammar and vocabulary, and some people always disagree with each other, Okay, let's start from the meaning of the word. So the meaning, the basic vocabulary meaning of the word is called denotation, and basically it's what you see in every dictionary when you are looking for a definition. So definition, denotation. When you're talking about emotional coloring of words, we refer to connotation. We need to know a part of speech, this word, or a word category. This word refers to word family relations, like when we take classroom objects, yes, which is definitely like a word family for pen, pencil, pencil case, whatever. Synonyms and antonyms of this word, yes, and formality. Whether this word is used in this or that context of usage, depending on how well you know the person, yes, what relationships between you are. Also, what I would add here is appropriacy. So whether this word is appropriate here, like if we can use this word in this particular context or not, and collocations, yes, whether these words go together or not. So make a mistake or do a mistake. That's the common problem. After that, we go to form, and we could look at like oral pronunciation as form, yes, and written pronunciation. This is not a typical CELTA approach, because in a CELTA approach we usually speak about form as written form, and then pronunciation goes there. But basically you can refer to it anytime you like, but you need to know that form goes second. After that, we need to also know the context of use. Oh, and again, coming back to appropriacy. So where to use this word, and more importantly, where not to use this word. So basically, all these things about a word. Common terms about Lexis. I'm not going to explain that to you. You can actually do it yourself. The thing is, what I use, there are so many online tools which can help you. One of them is Quizlet. You can actually Google for that if you're not using it yet. And you can actually write Quizlet TKT. And over there you will find a lot of different terms which you need for your exam. Because you remember that TKT is also based on the knowledge of terminology. So here is the basic terminology which you will need. So I'm just skipping that. Grammar. So coming back to grammar, again we are looking at the ways we present grammar, and we look at the form. Oh, actually first we look at the meaning, then we look at the form, and we look at the context of use, which is also very important. Again, coming back to terms, yes, you always need to learn the grammar terms, especially parts of speech, yes, which you need to be aware of. So the difference between, for example, like personal pronouns and personal adjectives, whatever. So all these things, like what is a common noun, yes, what is all of the things which are transitive and intransitive verb, all of these things are actually reflected in the exam. Again, you can go to Quizlet, yes, and you can find some sets for free, where you can have a look at the word and the definition. And at home you can practice that. Then, teaching. So how to teach grammar and Lexis? The basic way of that is PPP, which is presentation, practice, production. But also there are some other ways of teaching that. It's like TTT, which is test, teach, test, guided discovery, and there will be some other approaches which you will look at later, yes, but these are the basic things you need to know about. Yeah, so I'm not going to stop here for a long time. Probably, if you like, if you don't know still what it is, you can Google, yes, and you can find more information. Just, I would like you to be aware that these concepts are always also tested there. So, speaking about like grammar presentation, you also need to remember that you can present grammar deductively, starting from the rule, examples, and then go into practice, which was common practice over like maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and inductive. When we first study the examples, when we try to work out the rule together, and then we practice all this thing. Which one is better? Actually, all the people who are the proponents of communicative methodology say that, of course, inductive approach is better. As a practitioner, I would say that both approaches could be used, depending on your student. sorry, my Celta mentors, but I'm not a Celta trainer, luckily. So I can say that both approaches could be used. But I would use both of them in moderation, depending on the needs of your learner. But this is another topic which we're going to discuss. After that, functions. So the basic things which sometimes teachers are not aware of are functions, and here we are mostly talking about spoken functions. So what are functions? These are the reasons or situations in which we communicate and why we communicate. Yeah, some of these functions may be suggestions. Yeah, so when we want to suggest something, and here come a lot of like interesting things which mean that you can use a variety of grammar and lexical structures pertaining to one function. For example, when you are suggesting something, like you want to go to the cinema, like with your friends, you can use it in different ways. So you can say, how about, or why don't we, why not? Yes, if I were you, I would, but oh, let's. All of these are functional exponents, so figures of language which are used for a function, suggestions. Why do we need functions? Functions are the basic, like the basic tool of spoken and written language. Because when we are teaching our students, like for a general English course, and they have the aim of going abroad, we need to understand in which situations they're going to communicate, like ordering in a restaurant, yeah, this could also be a function, and then thinking about functional exponents, which we could use with them. Like, and teaching these functional exponents as one big chunk, not as a combination of different words, not overcomplicating that. So we have introduction. When you make introduction, hi, hello, nice to meet you. Clarification, could you tell it again? Oh, sorry, I didn't get it. Explanation, what I mean by this is, that implies that, okay? Request, could you please, can you, why don't you, and so on. So all of these things are related to functions. Again, read more on functions, yes, and I will later tell you like which books I use, yes, or which books I recommend. I'm still using them, I love them really, because I think they are the Bibles of English, where you can find all the information you need about that. Okay, so when we are talking about phonology, in phonology there are, phonology is not only about phonemes or sounds, right? So basically in English phonology what you need to know is also connected speech. Like, sometimes we don't understand, or our learners don't understand English when they listen to it, not because they don't know the words, but because they don't know where the words start and finish. We call them word boundaries. You can find one of these terms at the end of my list. And also, sometimes there are no word boundaries at all, because when they say, what you gonna do, yes, it's like, what are you going to do, yes, and it depends on the region, it depends on the dialect, and the students need to be aware of it. So sometimes knowledge about connected speech helps our students. So basically we look at assimilation, like if we say 10 boys in isolation, when we speak fast it will be 10 boys, so n assimilates into m when we speak. Why? Because it is easier to pronounce. Elision, when some sounds drop out. I didn't say, we say, or I didn't say. So t falls out when we say fast. Of course you can say didn't say you, but unfortunately it doesn't sound natural. Liaison, when the words are connected, yes, like, so usually it's when we, like one word is finished in r sound and another starts with a vowel sound. Intrusive sounds, w, r, y. I still remember law and order. In British English it will be law and order. So r appears out of nowhere. And if your students don't know that, they will never understand why first wall I would like to say. Why not second window? Because first wall is a first of all in the connected speech. So this is the knowledge that you need to know for your TKT and probably for your more effective teaching. Intonation and stress, you remember that in Russian we do not intonate at all. Like, we probably speak like with... No, we do intonate. We do believe that we intonate, but compared to British people, American people, and all other native speakers, we do not. So that's what we need to teach our students, so that the word shapes sound natural, as well as stress. Yes, not only word stress, but also sentence stressed. Which words are more stressed, which words are less stressed. And depending on this, which words are stronger, yes, which words are weaker, so weak forms, yeah, like had or had. So depending on if it is a meaningful word, like concept word, yes, or an auxiliary word, verb, yeah. So when we are talking about schwa sound, also in the weak forms, had, yeah. So all of these things you need to be aware of. Minimal pairs as well, you know that these are two words, or maybe more, which are different in one phoneme. Man, mean. That's it, this is the minimal pair. I don't know, like whatever. Nad, need, something like that. So all of these things, just, again, try to find all of these. By the way, TKT has issued a glossary. There are so many items there, but you can do it part by part. You can create cards. You can use Quizlet again, because Quizlet is for creating cards of your own, yes? And you will deal with terminology. All right, another way of presenting, yes, like another way of lesson structure would be TBL, task-based learning. It's a little bit too much to speak about, but I will just tell you that the first column goes to presentation, practice, production. When you present the information or material, then you practice it with your student, and then you try to produce it with your student. And TBL, task-based learning, when you first need to solve the task, and then you need to learn the language. So recently there was a lot of criticism about PPP because the teacher decides what language or what language structures to choose for their students. And sometimes the teachers totally ignore what structures students, like particular students, need. When I'm teaching functions and I would like them to know how about, but they don't want to know how about, they want to know let's. And it is easier for them for some reason. So basically TBL solves the problem of the teacher choosing the words and structures for the students. Basically, and it makes communication and learning a language meaningful. So first you start from the task, like you need to read short texts and decide who killed whom, yes? So probably the man was killed and who the killer is. But for that, all the students in the group need to communicate and share the information that they have. Sometimes we call it information gap activity, or jigsaw reading, depending on what you are doing. After that, they communicate, of course, in English, and they try to work out who the killer is. Sometimes they could be quite surprised. While they are communicating, the teacher is around, picking up some language the students may need, and the language that they are using in an incorrect way. Don't try to pick up all the mistakes. It's impossible to cover everything in one lesson. So perfectionism doesn't work in TBL. So you need one focus, so one structure to focus on, or a number of structures which relate to one function, to one topic. After that, so after achieving the goal, the students need to present a report. But to make this report good, of course, we need accuracy, so no mistakes. So probably we first do the controlled practice of the language which you have chosen. So you give them some open the brackets, fill in the gaps, whatever exercises you like. And after that, they present a report on who is the killer, or who the killer is, or who the murderer is, whatever. So basically that is what TBL is about. What it makes, yes, to our language learning. Actually, it shifts the focus of the students, because sometimes they are really tired of all these drills, of the same structure of the lesson all the time, of the teacher being dominating in the class and so on. Sometimes they want to take a little bit more initiative. So, second, they have the grounds for communicating, especially teenagers. When the task is engaging, they do whatever they like. Of course, in the course they will ask you some questions, But basically, this is a really meaningful form or way of creating your lesson. So read more about TBL or task-based learning. I will write it here. Probably it works with your students. What is bad about that? Like, not bad, but what could be inefficient? Not all the students are used to this format, and it may take some time before the teacher adjusts and the students adapt. So, again, so it requires time. But is it worth it? Definitely. Should you use it all the time, like 100%? No. You can use PPP, you can use TBL the next lesson. It depends. Sometimes you can use TBL in a sequence of lessons, but we will talk about it in the planning. Again, types of practice. When we are talking about PPP, we remember it's presentation, practice, production. This is a typical structure. So you present the material, and then you need to practice. Here come two types of tasks which you use in the practice, because we have controlled practice, where the teacher controls the answers. So the teacher already knows that there is one or two, or there are two answers to this question. And the teacher can control how well the students do the task. So, like, simply you have the answer key on your lap, yeah? So if you look at the task on the left, this is the controlled practice task. Its focus is accuracy, we call it no mistakes, and it is a closed type exercise. So you cannot change anything. There is nothing unpredictable about this task. On the right, you have a little bit more open task, because you need to write an email inviting your friends to the birthday party. Of course, the students know what to do, but what kind of language will they use? Can we control every word in this task? No, we cannot. So this is a freer practice or less controlled practice. Usually it focuses more on communication or fluency rather than accuracy, no mistakes. That's why writing contains so many mistakes. And this is a task. So you can use it for task-based learning or whatever. So two types of tasks: controlled practice, freer practice. Whatever you need to know. Closed task, open task, or open-ended task. When we are talking about examples of controlled tasks which are closed, which you cannot change, these are, so you can incorporate drills there, when the students repeat everything after the teacher, copying words or sentences, gap fill, it's actually typical, just chance, some dictations, and reading aloud. So these are the controlled, some types of controlled practice tasks. Freer practice tasks could include discussions, because you never know what kind of language your students will use in the discussion. Solving problems, the same. Information gap activity, when they are trying to solve this information gap, or one student has one piece of information, another student has another piece of information. And to get the full picture, they need to communicate. Again, you cannot control what language they can use. No, you can try to control, yes, especially if you want them to use one target structure, but basically it's unpredictable. Sharing and comparing ideas, experiences, and writing, emails, stories, letters, whatever. Okay, it was all about presenting language, yes, so in presenting systems. Now we are going to teaching skills, and as you remember, there are two types of skills. They are receptive and productive. So receptive skills are basically about listening and reading, and productive are about speaking and writing. And we will very quickly look at the types of lessons. And when we are teaching receptive skills, yes, the stages of a receptive lesson could be pre, yes, so before listening, for example, or before reading, while stage, so actually the reading or the listening task, and post stage, like after, which usually involves speaking or writing. These are the things you need to know as well, yeah? When we're talking about reading, you also need to be aware not only of reading as a skill, but also of sub-skills. We have two types of reading: intensive reading, when we need to focus and concentrate, and extensive reading, which is usually reading for pleasure. Here, like if we speak about intensive reading, it will be gist reading or skimming, reading for specific information or scanning, reading for detailed comprehension, inferring attitudes, reading for moods. So if the author agrees or disagrees, if the author is positive or negative, like in this course, like text analysis, it's sometimes called tone, yes? Deducing meaning of words from the context. It's like when we ask our students to look at the text, yes, and try to ignore the unknown words, because they can understand their meaning from the context. Unfortunately, they cannot do it at the first attempt, so we need to teach them this skill. All right, so when we are talking about listening, the same stages: pre-listening, then main listening task. Usually there are 2 listening tasks, and follow-up, which is usually speaking or writing. Again, listening sub-skills: intensive listening and extensive listening. So extensive listening is usually listening to a song, to a podcast, so without any specific purpose. Intensive listening has a purpose or a focus. Listening for gist, again, main idea. Listening for specific information, like different details, yes, which we don't need to interpret. Like we need to listen for the year, or we need to listen for the name. Listening for detail or detailed comprehension. There are 2 different ways to refer to this listening. Here we need to interpret if the author, like we usually talk about paraphrasing the same idea. And listening for attitude, how the speaker feels about this or that concept. All right. Writing. When we're talking about writing, there are a lot of sub-skills. Usually when we are talking about writing, it's about fluency and accuracy. Yes, we also have fluency in writing, and it's especially vital for exam preparation. But here we will look at the accuracy, what makes accuracy in writing. So correct spelling, forming letters, so handwriting actually, and writing legibly, especially for handwritten exams, like paper exams, like IELTS and some Cambridge exams. Punctuating correctly, yes, punctuation in English, by the way, is a must, don't forget about that. Using correct layouts, yeah, like that your letter looks like a letter, not like an essay. Choosing the right vocabulary, grammar and word order. Joining sentences correctly, which we call linking. Using paragraphs, like paragraphing, 1 idea per paragraph. Also, other sub-skills which could be also tested in writing. Communicative achievement. It means that you have answered exactly the questions which were asked in the task. So if you were asked to write a letter to your boss, and you wrote it like, "Hi man," and so on, and you didn't cover some of the points that they asked you to cover, so that will be like you are writing about a promotion, and you wrote about, "Hey, yesterday I watched TV all day," so no communicative achievement here. So using correct register, right formality, yes, so when we are writing to a boss, saying or writing "hey" or "hi" would be inappropriate. Using writing strategies, especially for process writing, drafting, redrafting and peer correction. We will deal with it a little bit later. Taking notes, which is also a skill, and summarizing. If we look at different types of writing, usually we speak about 2 types. Product writing, which starts from analyzing the model, and process writing. We will look at them right now. Speaking about, just a moment, process writing. Yeah, so process writing is when you have nothing at all. You have just a piece of paper and a task. So the first thing you need to do together with your student is brainstorm the ideas. All together, in pairs, individually, doesn't matter. But just you need to have some concepts to write about. Making notes, because after that these notes will be organized into the structure of the paragraph. Planning how to organize and reorganize that. Focus on language, what language to use in this particular type of writing. If it is a report, you need to think about infinitive structures such as it is essential to, or you may even think about passives, yes. He is considered to be, it is referred to, and so on. After that, you make the first draft, yes, which is like the version which will be corrected. Then you edit it, then you redraft, and then you draft again, and then you proofread it either together or individually. So these are the stages for process writing. Product writing is my favorite one, especially when the students are just learning to write. You have the model, you read the model and highlight the features. You have a letter of application, and you highlight the features. What could be the features? Organization, linkers, language, whatever. Then you make a controlled practice of these features, for example, language, using modals, using should, and whatever. Then organization of ideas, you brainstorm and organize your own ideas, and then you do the writing task itself. This type of writing is easier, but for TKT you need to know about the existence of both parts. Okay, speaking. Teaching speaking and speaking in TKT, you need to focus on grammar and Lexis. Functions, again, there's like suggesting, requesting, whatever. Features of connected speech, what you're gonna do, first of all, and so on. And what to do about that, because don't forget that speaking also involves listening to other people. Appropriacy, if I can use this word in this context. Body language, which is also important, and interaction patterns. How you are going to interact with your partner. If it is a monologue, one person, yes. If it is a dialogue, whatever. So, in speaking, it's important to combine accuracy and fluency. So, accuracy is about focus on mistakes, and fluency is about focus on successful and fast and natural communication. So, please try to focus on both. So, in a speaking lesson, usually we have the following stages. So, we have the lead-in, which is the introduction to the topic, brainstorming some ideas, sharing with your partner, open class feedback, and so on. Then you do practice activities on speaking. Usually a speaking lesson involves functions. So today our function is suggesting something. Then you show functional exponents to your students. You drill them, like how about, what about, and so on. You drill them, and then you're trying to use them in the situation which is close to the one you had at the beginning. For example, a dialogue. Yes, so you had a dialogue where people are discussing the options on what to do in the evening. Then you look at the language of suggesting. Then you make a controlled practice, which is very close to the same dialogue. And then they make the dialogue of their own. The easiest way of making a speaking lesson. Of course, if you want to organize a discussion, it will be a little bit different. So you need to brainstorm the ideas. You need to lead in the language. Yes, so introduce the new language. Practice that in a little bit of an activity to see that they understand how to use it correctly, and then organize their discussion. Usually it's free discussion, or you can even end your speaking lesson in writing as a short report or summary of the main discussion points. So it's also possible. Okay, mistakes. When we are dealing with mistakes or errors, yes, actually, we will refer to mistakes, but we will look at errors and slips. Slip is something which you make, or this is a mistake that you make when you are tired or inattentive. Usually we say slip of a tongue. And it's not very important, but you need to understand and know your students and to get where it is a slip and where it is an error. Because an error is a mistake which is quite serious, and it's caused by a number of reasons. So some of the reasons could be that the students don't know the material. Some of the reasons could be that the students are too reliant on their first language, and so on. So basically we will look at some reasons for making errors, why students make errors. The first one is called L1 interference, which means that their first language, let's say Russian, affects their performance in English. Like when they use "if you will come to me," We can say that sometimes, but it's not that common. So if you will, yes, like in Russian we think that yes, it's future, but in English the future is reflected in the second clause. So this is L1, typical L1 interference. Developmental errors are the types of errors which show that your students have learned some information you taught, but unfortunately now they are applying it in a different way. Last week I was teaching regular verbs to my students. The thing is that I forgot to tell them that there are regular and irregular verbs. And the next class, one of the students came in and said, "Oh, you know, yesterday I goed to the cinema." Should I be surprised? Actually, no, because first of all, I should have anticipated that I didn't give him sufficient information that some of the words cannot be used like that. Another thing is, it is a good, it shows basically, or it's a good demonstration that actually the student understands how the rule works. But later the students, of course, will get to know that there is went and other things. It can also refer to overgeneralization when we think that this rule applies to everything. And we can use will for any future. Okay? Interlanguage, again, it's connected with developmental errors because sometimes our students' language sounds really funny, especially if you are teaching elementary and pre-intermediate classes. Their English is very specific and it doesn't look like English at all, and we feel like correcting them all the time because they may get the word order wrong or put some words which are not which are not supposed to be there, and so on, or they keep translating every word and they think that it's real language. Yeah, so basically this is a good sign. It means that the students are developing in terms of the language, but at the moment this is not the language, this is interlanguage that they are developing. And finally, basically the main reason for errors or for making errors is lack of attention or noticing. Some students don't use this third person singular like when they are talking about he go. Yes. Some professionals say that, okay, it's time to forget about this mistake, we don't need to focus on that, there are so many things to think about. Some of the students make this mistake not because there is something wrong with their intellectual capacity. No, they're just inattentive. They believe that other people can understand them without this s ending. And they are right, people can understand them. Okay, so basically, types of correction. So when we are correcting the students, there are two ways to do that. Yes, so there is on-the-spot feedback when you interrupt the student and say, no, never say do a mistake, say make a mistake. Or delayed feedback. And depending on the situation, of course, you use different types of feedback. Like whether you do it right now, yes, you understand that you need to spot this mistake here and now. Or you want to wait until they finish the task. How to do it better? If you are working with controlled practice, so you are trying to drill or you are trying to focus on the accuracy and not making mistakes of this particular structure, like you are teaching first conditional and you don't want them to use will after if, stop and correct them every time you are doing the controlled practice task. Why not? Okay. But if they are doing the freer practice task, they are discussing what to do if they have some problems. So then it is better to walk around, monitor and collect the mistakes. So here delayed feedback will work. Alright, speaking about assessment. Yes, assessment is usually about tests which we have and organize in class. And there are different types of assessment. So if you look at the first line, there is informal assessment, which is like how you monitor your students and you notice, okay, this student is fine, that student could be better with this, what should I do for that? I should give him more exercises on this, I should focus more on this, and so on. This is about informal assessment. So basically it's about your own observation and you don't put any marks to the students for that. Formal assessment is mostly about tests, testing, and all kinds of papers which your students write. tests could be objective and subjective. An objective test is the test which does not rely on the students, on the teacher's, judgment. Like when you are teaching listening or reading, or when you are preparing your students for international exams like FC or YG or any kind of exam, you remember these multiple choice questions, yeah? Question and ABC or ABCD. This is an example of an objective test because the teacher has no influence on this task. So if the person gets it right, the person gets the mark. If not, no mark. Subjective tests are more concerned with speaking or writing because testing productive skills is always very difficult. How do you know which mistake is more important than another? How do you know what is more important, grammar mistakes or structure? If the students get the structure wrong, is it more important for the student? Like, how should you judge that? Of course, nowadays we have a lot of different kinds of scoring systems, yes, and usually when there is an exam like FC or IELTS, they always give you the scoring system. So to get band 6, you must do this, this, this. But sometimes it's quite unclear and vague. That's why these tests have a great degree of subjectivity. Formative assessment and summative assessment. Summative assessment is about giving a mark to the student. Formative assessment is more about shaping and changing the program for this individual student. So basically, if you are making tests just for the marks, for putting them in the register, do the summative assessment. But if you see that the marks of this particular student are quite low, or the marks of all the students in this topic is low, probably you should come back to this topic a little bit later. This is an example of formative assessment, which affects how you design the course. Diagnostic test and placement test. When you meet the students for the first time, sometimes you need to place them into groups. Not at school, of course, but when we are talking about private education. This is a placement test, which decides which level your students are. But when they are already there in the group, so they are approximately the same level, plus minus, yes, you want to diagnose their needs and to diagnose what they already know about the topic and what they lack. This is the diagnostic test. So then you say, this person lacks understanding of present perfect, or this person lacks understanding of conditionals, whatever. Progress test, achievement test, proficiency test. So progress test and achievement test, they basically could be the same because they are related to what you are teaching in the class. So these are the tests you do at the end of the module, at the end of the academic year, whatever. While proficiency test is not connected to what you teach. So an example of proficiency test could be IELTS, FC, Cambridge Advanced, PTE, PET, GMAT, whatever. So they just take the general knowledge, yes, and basically they are trying to compile their own test. So you might have covered a number of topics, but this topic might not appear in this proficiency test. So self-assessment and peer assessment. Self-assessment is when students try to notice their mistake and put their marks. Peer assessment is when they are assessing the works by others. Feedback and portfolio. Feedback is what the teacher or the peers, or probably the student himself or herself, do in class. Portfolio is more about collecting students' mistake and students' works, yes, and later looking at the progress of how the student is developing. By the way, nowadays people are trying to leave the test aside as the major way of assessment and go to portfolios, correcting and so on. But these are the things you regularly do. What is usually tested? Accuracy, fluency, yes, so no mistakes, how natural your speaking is, appropriacy, so if the word is okay for this context, pronunciation, interaction patterns, how the students can maintain or develop a monologue, a dialogue, handwriting if you are talking about writing, punctuation, grammar and vocabulary. Of course, you can think about some other components you would like to focus on. So, motivation. Students also, they deal a lot with the motivation. So we have extrinsic and intrinsic motivation of the students, especially when we are talking about learners. So intrinsic motivation is what motivates you from inside, yes? So basically you love English only for learning English. You just love learning. Extrinsic motivation is learning English for the sake of going to another country for permanent residence, whatever. Sometimes extrinsic motivation can boost intrinsic motivation. These are the things. Learners, when you are reading about learners, because this is another question which you will ask, you will be asked, there are two types of theories. The older one, which is the learning styles theory, and the multiple intelligences theory. So learning styles was usually connected with visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, but now people do believe that there is no like 100% one learning style, yes, and there is more than that. So it's not only about like perceptions, yeah, it's also about how we think, like logical, mathematical, musical. So read about those two topics. I think you will be really interested if you haven't read about it yet, because I'm sure you have. Right, talking about learners' needs, yes. You will actually look at learners' needs, and there are personal needs and learning needs. We are all different, and Cambridge thinks, and actually I agree with that we need, first of all, to understand what kind of needs our learners have, what they want from our lessons. So materials, especially talking about teenagers, yes, you need to be very careful about materials. Topics, yes, so yes, of course, because I usually look at the book at the start of the year and I ask my students, which topics do you find most interesting? Which topics wouldn't you like to study? I'm actually quite free to choose other topics if my students don't like the topic. Sometimes it happens. For example, the topic of crimes. All of the group said we don't want to study crimes. Okay, nothing like that. Maybe they will study it later, who knows. Pace of lessons. How fast the lessons should be. Now I'm speaking too fast because I want to incorporate everything into this module, yes? But some students, they may need a slower pace. Activities, what kind of activities you like, you dislike, and so on. Approach to teaching, if you like teaching grammar or being taught inductively, deductively, you want to be more autonomous, you want to be more so-called you want to be trained by the teacher all the time. You want the teacher to dominate the class because the teacher is a teacher. What are you paid for? So we are all different. Treatment of individual learners. So how we need to treat learners individually. We all know there are mixed ability groups. Some students know something better than others, and we need to cater the materials. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alena, thank you for the question. You just skip the topics students don't like. Yes, I skip the topics my students don't like, but later I revisit these topics, but in a little bit different way, because I can bring the text to the class and I see how this text goes, because sometimes they may have wrong perceptions of the crimes themselves. But if I bring a text about some kind of investigation, they might read it, but I always ask them what they think their priority is. Actually, before doing the course, yes, at the start of the course, I always diagnose my students' needs, and I make a questionnaire about what they feel their weaknesses are, what they feel they are strengths are, and so on. But this is the topic of another webinar, yes. But I think this is fair, because I need to know what my students need, because I may not know about every student. Okay, and learning needs are about materials, activities, approaches to teaching, approaches to learning, and how much workload they want to do. Okay, so when we are talking about methods, what also you need to know about methods, I'm not going to tell you about each method, but these are the most common ones which will be tested in your TKT. So grammar translation, the usual one, audiolingual method, which is used without the first language. So basically it's just habit formation. You say, I repeat. That's all my English. Direct method, again, no English, yes, and the students are trying to communicate in a direct way based on perceptions, based on interaction, and so on. Suggestopedia, a very interesting method. Then students listen to some music and they actually develop the conversation, first of all, in their native language, and then the teacher helped them to like make this conversation like in English, translated into English, and then they basically discussed all these things, yes, and that made the lesson meaningful. And then they recorded their like joint project, yes, which was this like Suggestopedia was about. Total physical response is the approach which is widely used with students, and we move in this approach usually. Stand up, students stand up. Sit down, students sit down. Put up your hand. Actually, all of the songs for young learners, most of the songs for young learners are based on this approach. Yes, swim, and you show how to swim. So this is based on this. These are the initial response of our body to do what we are told. Communicative approach is basically what we are talking about, all this PPP, and trying not to use the first language. But now it's changing. The silent way, where the teacher is just not speaking, but we have the special questionnaire rods of different colors. These are like small blocks of wood, which have different colors, and you can teach grammar with them. You can teach Lexis with them, but you don't speak. So this, or you speak the minimum. You can read about that. This is a very specific way of teaching. Community language learning is based on interaction and being good to each other. Task-based learning, what I told you about, you give the task first, the students do the task, and then you focus on language. And the lexical approach, where you regard the language not as a combination of like Lexis plus grammar, but the what we call the grammaticalized Lexis, yes, so, or lexicalized grammar. So the thing is that we actually refer to the language as the combination of chunks, combination of word combinations. Yeah, so have you ever been would not be have you ever, and you need to know and be responsible for every word. No, you can actually teach have you ever been, and the students will understand in which context they use it without actually thinking too much about that. It's also based on collocations a lot. But please read about all of them. I think they will be useful for your module. All right, when we're talking about lesson planning and resources, very quickly, what is tested? Aims, lesson plan and lesson plan's components, planning one lesson or a sequence of lessons, assessment, reference sources, how to adapt course book and course book materials, and how to use supplementary materials and aids. So what kind of information or what kind of materials you are going to bring into the class. So basic concepts which you need to know: syllabus, aims, procedures, don't plan too much, and make learners aware of the aims. So this is the strategy of Cambridge. Okay, speaking about questions to ask yourselves, yeah? So when you are designing the topic, will the topic be interesting and motivating to my learners? It's coming back to the question by Alena, yeah? Are activities and materials age and level appropriate? Have I planned enough? Have I planned too much? Have I thought about how to start and end the lesson? Does each step in the lesson help me to achieve the aim which I planned at the beginning? And what will I do if my students have a little bit different level? What will I do with fast finishers? What will I do with slowly paced students? So all of these questions need to be answered in planning. And when you're talking about variety, always when you are planning, think about varied menu of the lesson. Pace. Sometimes the lesson is fast, sometimes it becomes slower. Plan it. Interaction patterns. If your students are working individually or in pairs or as a group or as an open class. Skills. What skills are you developing? Productive or receptive, and where? Level of difficulty. If the task is challenging enough, or maybe it's too difficult, or like less difficult than is expected. Content. Yes? So from not jumping from one content to another one, yes, but trying to keep to one and the same thread, yes. Mood, yes, sometimes we are too relaxed, sometimes we are a little bit more stirred, and connected with this is stirring and settling activities. Read about that, that will be interesting for you. Okay, and how to adapt the book, I will skip it because basically you don't need it, it's more practical, you can actually look at it later. And about Module 3, what is tested there? So teachers and learners' language in the classroom, the proportion of L1 and L2, given instructions, yeah, classroom management, teacher roles, correcting learners and giving feedback. We have already discussed some of them, so we are going to look at them very fast. Teacher roles: planner, informer, manager, involver, diagnostician, language source. There are other roles, please read about them. You can find many of them on the internet. These are the ones which are usually found in TKT. Speaking about classroom management, you need to think about interaction patterns, so how your students are going to work individually, in pairs, in groups, mingling activities, so whether the students are going to work with one partner, how they will go to another partner. If they cannot find the partner, what to do. So you need to plan that when you are talking about classroom management. Nominating, how are you going to nominate the students? So if you're going to call them by name or you're going to ask them to call another student. I usually use this piece of paper with the words "let me start." So I give them these pieces of paper and the one who chooses this one is "let me start." Okay. So again, so it depends. Group dynamics, yeah? So how is the group going to develop, whether they are going to be silent or whether they're going to be working individually or be stirred and running around the classroom. Rapport with your learners, how well you maintain relationship with them. Whether you should be positive or sometimes a little bit tougher on the student. So it's all up to you. Grading language, what level you are on and your students are on, and how to make it like really adjusted to the learner's need. Learning contract, sometimes you make up a set of rules which your learners sign. You can make up a set of rules together, like don't run in the classroom, don't use your mobile phones for like chatting purposes and so on. And language, so what kind of language you will use for eliciting information, maintaining discipline, setting the scene, or explaining something. So this is also important about classroom management. How you will group learners, if you're going to assign it by yourself or the students will assign that. There are a lot of ways of grouping. You can actually just skip it and then go to another one, but later you can Google for that. There are a lot of interesting things. All right, and when we are talking, about the books which you can use in your TKT preparation, but I think just these books are a must for any teacher. So, Learning Teaching by Jim Scrivener or How to Teach English by Jeremy Harmer are like the books which are a must for all the teachers, and you will find a lot of interesting things there. If you're struggling with grammar, if you're struggling with grammar explanations, please look at Michael Swan and look at For Grammar for English Language Teachers by Martin Parrott. If you're struggling with terminology for TKT, look at Scott Thornby and A to Z of ELT. It contains, this is just the reference material. If you are struggling with pronunciation, yes, basically you can look at the book of pronunciation, or you can look at Adrian Underhill, Sound Foundations. Yeah, this is one of my favorite books, because before that I was very weak. Here it is, Underhill. Yeah, in phonetics and phonology. And finally, Classroom Management Techniques by Jim Scrivener. These are the most important things which you can do about your language learners and how to deal with challenges which you face as a teacher on a regular basis. Oh yes, essential teaching knowledge. Thank you, Olchika. Yes, I do agree with that. So this is really perfect. Yeah, so I hope I have answered some of your questions at least, but there is so much more you can learn. But at least I think I got you thinking about something, yes? So do you have any questions which you would like to ask at the moment? Thank you everybody for attending. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Unfortunately, I had so much information that we didn't have time for interact. Yeah, you will be sent the presentation. Thank you. Oh yeah, I'm going to be teaching in an hour already, but it's only 8 o'clock in Ukraine, so that's okay. Guys, sorry I have to leave you. Yes, so thank you very much. Yes, have a good day to all of you. Stay productive. Yes. Oh yeah. Thank you. Yes. Oh, you can ask Olga about books a little bit more, because I think she is the expert in all of these books. Yes, these are just some of them. There are so many of them, like wonderful professional development books. Thank you. See you. Goodbye. Have a good day.